welcome everyone to Season 2, Episode 3 of the TnE Podcast Show. Today's topic, fiery topic, of course, is about Taiwan versus China. Is Taiwan part of China or not? 台湾是中国的一部还是不是? So today we're going to talk about this very fiery topic. Let's get directly into the first article here. Anonymous person says, is Taiwan part of or separate from China, right? And this person says, as a mainlander Chinese, I want to share my own opinions. He talks about his great-grandfather and his great-grandfather are CCPs, and he says he is anti-CCPs. Tong, do you believe he is anti-CCP?
Well, this is actually a good one to start with because this person looks like he's not exactly on the full side of the CCP, but he wants to show exactly some of the stuff that some of the Chinese have been saying on the forums. So, pretty interesting.
Agree. So let's get into what he's talking about. So basically, this guy, I'll just call him Tuzi. Tuzi, mind you, in Chinese means rabbit, because we cut right down to here, and he loves to use this rabbit graphic here from Baidu. So who knows where this came from, but let's just tell you that this guy is using different animals to represent different countries. We're not saying that's good or bad.
He's looking at the Chinese forums and that they're using all these animals, and some of them are kind of derogatory, racist depictions of animals and to represent certain countries, and he's translating it for us. So
that's right. All right, so let's get into it. So this guy is basically said he grew up with Taiwanese music and games. He says the Xuanyuan sword is one of his favorite games. By the way, the other one is Dota. The game influenced his life, his love for country, much more than any other game. Back to his question, he says, my ideal form of China is something like the United States of China, a real democracy, not a republic that only exists on the papers. So he says that Taiwan and Tibet should have their own right to make their choices, but he doesn't know how to make it. Right? How can we do this? Mm-hmm. He says someone agrees with him. Some people agree with him. We know English is not his first language. That's fine. While a very small number of extreme nationalists may dream, very small. There's only a small number of nationalists, certainly in China. Yeah. Right? Right, Tong?
Of course. I mean, that's it's not. Maybe it's not that difficult to actually find one, though.
Maybe not so hard on Baidu forums. Maybe not. May dream, so this says the extreme nationalists may dream that the CCP would conquer the world one day.
Look at the graphic, the map. I mean, look at that.
Yeah, I think this map right here.
What do you think about that map, Ethan?
I think the map might have something to do with their dreams of conquering the world.
How many times have you heard Chinese say China is the world's next superpower, or it's going to overtake the U.S.?
Well, I mean, we've certainly heard. I mean, that's a whole nother topic. We definitely can go into that. But China is definitely aiming to be a world superpower. Back to the topic. In fact, nationalism may be at a fever pitch now. I think he's right.
Probably.
Something to do with all this banning. Like the Chinese aren't they banning things recently, Tong?
Everything. Yeah, I mean.
What are they banning recently?
It's like over 50 foreign brands being banned: Nike, Adidas, H&M, like whatever have you. Like basically any national brand that has said something that pissed off the Chinese government, they boycott and ban immediately. So
yes, so it is definitely in a fever pitch right now. As far as the internet is definitely pretty angry.
And we already talked about the kimchi paocai thing, which is one example of that as well.
That's right. That is one example of this very deep rabbit hole, so to speak. Every country has some extremists. I think you're right. There is only one China in the world. Looks like this in their eyes. Okay, I think this is, some people believe that there's a one China future in the whole world, which words are used to mean that both PRC and ROC are one China officially before. He says, I love China and Taiwan. I hope for a best solution. Okay, and then let's just preface this by this is going down a very dirty, deep rabbit hole. And the words he is using, not this guy from the article, the words that are used on these Chinese forums, on these BBS sites, are very racist. So just to warn you, we'll go into it just a little tiny snippet, and you can follow at your own leisure to see how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go over the first one.
And it talks over just a few. We don't have to go over the
That's right. Tong, let's just do the first three. I think. Go ahead, Tong. Introduce the first one.
Okay. So this is a translation from the original board, right? So you can add the link there. So this is by the users of that board, and this is basically what they're talking about. It says those years, those rabbits and monkeys, and I think they're using rabbits here to refer to China, and as Chinese, and the monkeys referring to Vietnamese. So.
Yeah, as we mentioned, it's probably a little racist. Just
but
a little.
This is what they're posting about, though.
That's right. This is exactly what they're posting, and they're using animals to depict different countries. And that's just the beginning, friends. This is just the tip of the iceberg, as we say it. The very thin layer of the cake. Okay, let's go to floor 2. And as we remind you that it just gets deeper and worse as we go down.
Each floor.
Floor 2, Tong, can you introduce us?
Yeah, so it says I should begin with the story that monkeys built their country. Unless that, you'll never understand how shameful they betrayed to us. I guess this is talking about the Vietnamese versus China that kind of split right there, and the kind of disputes that are happening there. So the monkeys shouted, "We are the justice force fighting against Chinese imperialists." And then it says, you can go over actually the script is a little bit confusing for me, but it says the Philippines monkeys or the Vietnamese monkeys. The reply, and he's going over all these replies on the forum, all translated, of course. It must be that the monkey shouted, "Chi chi za za chi 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 chi." Yes, it must be like this. And the next reply says, "I want a bigger picture." And then next reply, as a newer, may ask, "Who are the monkeys?" The reply, "It's Vietnamese." So the real scene is, "Chi chi chi chi, you don't have a penis, chi chi." And the next reply after that, Vietnamese monkeys. So in this bulletin board, monkeys mean East. They don't just mean Vietnamese, actually. They're talking about monkeys as all Southeast Asians. So,
that's right.
Yep. So you can keep going down, actually.
Yeah, I mean, let's just end with this floor 2, because I think this is already deep enough.
Well, the floor 2 is gives you a good sense already about what's happening.
Yeah, floor 2
here.
is you already understand kind of how they view, this is
Reply
definitely
15.
we definitely want to say that there's certainly Chinese who are very non-racist and who are like cultured and everything, but this is clearly some of the dominant perception, some of the dominant thinking on these forums is there's people doing talking like this is super racist. And I know everyone, to be honest, has some perceptions of other cultures and some belief maybe that they're superior, and Americans do as well, but this talking about monkeys shouting "ji ji ja ja ji 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 ji," and that's pretty super racist.
And we can, I mean, just go over in the subsequent forums, you'll hear about them referring to Western powers as cocks.
That's right. Where does it mention
gall cocks? That's actually still floor 2.
Here we go. Okay,
there,
go ahead and finish this up, Tom.
Yep. So monkeys mean Southeast Asians, right? And then actually the floor 3 says Vietnamese has been Chinese territory many times. Became a Gaul cock colony in 1883. And I think what they mean by Gaul cock colonies, they're referring to Gaul as maybe the ancient name of France and Europe and that. So they mean here by cocks as Westerners, Europeans, right? So and then floor 4 says Japs invaded Vietnam to cut KMT, which is Kuomintang. French army and rabbit, which is the Chinese here, is apparently the last Gaul cock who could fight dead in Napoleon times, probably referring to the Napoleonic Wars. Gaul cock says Kershaw rabbit, which means they lost to Chinese. So this just gives you an idea of the type of things they're talking about here with relation to the war, the colonies and stuff, and they're doing it in a really derogatory way.
That's right. So that's a really deep rabbit hole, so to speak. I think this is a pretty interesting article, and it just shows some of the thought patterns that the people in the forums are thinking about and how they talk about other cultures. All right, let's move on to article number 2, Jackson Lee's answer to, is Taiwan part of or separate from China?
Ooh.
All right, Jackson Lee is, what do we know about him? He lives in Shanghai.
Knows a thing or two about China.
This guy lives in Shanghai, and he knows a thing or two about China.
Yep.
It's culture and history, so we must believe everything he says. No, I'm kidding. All right. Okay, so, all right, Tong, take it away.
So his answer is basically saying the Taiwanese passport, it states that Taiwan is a province of China because it has China in the name. It says Republic of China, and this is an argument you see a lot of mainlanders make a lot about. Taiwan's a part of China. The reason why is because they have China in the name, Republic of China, and the Constitution or the map or something has mainland China in it. Therefore, it's part of China, right? Which doesn't really make sense because you could claim basically anything. Like the U.S. could claim China as part of their territory. It doesn't mean it's so, right? It doesn't mean it's true. You got to look at the reality. Just because Taiwan's map or constitution or their passport or something has their name or has the territory doesn't actually make it theirs, right? You got to look at the reality. You can't just look at the name or the constitution stuff.
That's
right.
right. I think what we want to highlight is how do we separate legitimate arguments from what these arguments that these people are using, right? I mean, just claiming that it's yours because it kind of claims that Taiwan is theirs because it's just a little chunk of their property, so to speak.
Yeah, so
Doesn't legitimize it.
Basically, their argument is that Taiwan is a part of China because the Republic of China themselves claim the mainland as part of the Republic of China, right? Which doesn't make it any better. Their argument is basically, oh, Taiwan says China, all of China is there, so Taiwan's part of China, but it's not reflective of the reality because the reality is Taiwan, the Republic of China, only controls that island of Taiwan, right? When mainland China is controlled by the PRC, right?
That's right. I think that's the best. You just highlighted the best argument we have against.
I mean, all these arguments to me are not very legitimate, and I can refute all of them. This is the argument that's commonly made, but it doesn't make sense because it's not equal to reality. So
right.
That's response to that answer.
Good points. Is there anything else we want to highlight on here? They show the two passports, of course, talking about ROC controlling.
No, I think this one's we already talked about it. I think we can go on to the next answer.
Let's move on to our third favorite. We have a recurring character. We call her the Chinese Santa, also known as Spring Jiang.
Spring Zhang.
Spring Zhang. We really like her beautiful. I don't know where she must like Santa, right? She must like Christmas.
And she studied at colleges and universities. That makes her an expert.
She must be an expert. We don't even know which colleges and universities, Tom, but she must be an expert.
She studied at them.
I mean, it would be nice if you say which colleges you went to legitimize your position on something. We recommend you to list which colleges you went to and not make it up. Because if you make it up, people will find out. And then it kind of delegitimizes your argument. So keep it real. All right, Tom, let's talk about is Taiwan part or separate from China? Spring Jiang. Taiwan was a part of China, that's for sure. All right, this is probably my favorite article, Tom. What do you think?
Yep, this is one of my favorite answers because it kind of highlights exactly what most mainland Chinese think. And you can see the top first paragraph quotes the 1992 consensus signed by mainland Taiwan. And that's one of the things is like mainland Chinese think Taiwan is part of China based on just this legal written paper stuff with the United Nations or like with all these documents and treaties they signed. But, it doesn't really mean much, right? It doesn't reflect reality. So it says China has different meanings. Of course, it's another one of those confusing things. You want to talk about what is China? Is it mainland China? Is it China plus Taiwan? Is the whole Sinosphere? It's including Hong Kong, right? Like, this is again one of those. But when people referring to Taiwan and China, they usually mean Taiwan as what the Republic of China controls, and China is what the PRC controls, right? So this is one of those arguments I don't care too much about because it's a naming thing. So it's not very relevant here, and Chinese apparently think it's very relevant, but I don't think it's very relevant.
Let's skip. I know there's a part at the end paragraph that we wanted to mention.
Yes.
Let's see. Okay, let's just read. I'm just going to read this out. As a mainlander, she says, I totally understand the reason Taiwanese people think they are from Taiwan, not from China. I will not feel frustrated if Taiwanese people tell me they are from Taiwan. Somehow I don't believe this, Spring Jiang. Nor will I try to argue with them on this issue. This whole article is basically an argument. So she kind of nullifies her statement here, to be honest. Emotionally, mainlanders think Taiwan is still a part of China. Yes, they are very emotional about it. And Taiwanese think Taiwan is an independent country. Both sides are extremely emotional. Everyone knows this. However, this problem has never been
an emotional issue.
Hold on. This problem has never been an emotional issue, but a political and historical issue, Tom. Let's just get this out in the open and say this is not an emotional issue.
Well, can't be.
Okay, I admit that Taiwan is now out of control of PRC now. Actually, for a very long time, yes, has been. So it is pretty reasonable for Taiwanese people to think that they have no relationship with China, especially the young generation. I don't know what will happen next, but I believe that we will find a way to solve the problem. Yes, I hope that you do find a way to solve the problem without crazy amount of Chinese military force extended into Taiwan.
So something I actually want to highlight about this answer and the next answer after is they talk about the UN a lot, and they say, oh, Taiwan is not a country or not independent because it doesn't have a seat in the UN. Well, it doesn't matter because the UN doesn't determine who's a country and who's independent or not. I mean, China was not a part of the UN until 1971, like she mentioned, right? Actually, does that mean that China was never independent before it got a seat in the UN? Right, it doesn't. So that doesn't make sense. Obviously, it was independent before that as well.
Right. I think hailing
so the UN
to the
doesn't
UN,
determine
yeah.
it doesn't determine who's independent or who's not. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So appealing to this kind of argument would say is invalid. Anything that appeals to the UN claiming legitimacy or not, because who says it's up to the UN, which is a recent governing power, or it's not up to the UN to decide who is the country or not necessarily.
Yeah, because,
especially when Chinese culture and Taiwanese culture have been around Chinese culture has been around thousands of years, and Taiwanese is the same roots. So
if the UN determined independence, then that means before 1945, before the UN was created, that means there was no countries, right? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So you can't claim. I wouldn't say that using the UN as an argument is a good way to back up your statement. All right, shall we move on to Gason Will's answer?
Yes. So basically, his answer is kind of long, but the first few sentences kind of describe what he's talking about. It's again the UN resolution stuff. So he's talking about the 1992 consensus, two sides of Taiwan. What they're talking about with the 1992 is the whole one China policy, right? It's like you have to acknowledge China, and if you acknowledge China, you can't acknowledge Taiwan, and that means if you don't acknowledge Taiwan, that Taiwan is not independent. But that's not the case, right? So we know that Taiwan has its own government, it has its own passport, it has its own currency, has its own flag. The PRC has no direct control over it, right? Even Chinese citizens from mainland, if they go to Taiwan, they need a visa, right?
Yep.
So it's all those things, right? Means that Taiwan is actually independent. Right. So it doesn't matter. You can talk about whatever treaty they signed or the UN acknowledgement. It doesn't match to reality, is what I'm saying, right? So it's like you can have it in your constitution, your treaty, all this legal jargon stuff. It doesn't really make it real.
That's right. I would think this article is just an extension of Pring Jiang's answer, talking about arguing that the UN legitimizes Chinese control over Taiwan, which it doesn't, because China and Taiwan both have a history stretching way back before the UN even existed. So that's not a valid argument to say that the UN has the final say on this topic.
Yeah. So again, going back to examples, like what if the U.S. actually put China as part of the U.S. as part of the Constitution, then they force the UN to acknowledge it? Does that mean China is now part of the U.S.? Right? So it's yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah, that doesn't really hold water. All right, is there anything else we wanted to highlight from this? He just goes on and on and on,
he basically
talking about the UN.
Copy and pasted the entire UN resolution as if
this
that's
is like he blasted the whole UN resolution and just keeps going on and on and on about it.
Basically, he thinks this is the final say on whether Taiwan's independent because the UN said so.
Yeah, so I mean, this is unfortunately we went through multiple articles from Quora, and this is kind of the overall thinking of these Chinese netizens is mostly, it comes down to that most of them are using this UN argument, or most of them are pointing back to just China's quote legitimate claims on Taiwan, right? Yep. Is that kind of much summed up? There's like basically those two arguments.
Yeah,
I didn't really see too much
they talk
else
about Taiwan being historically a part of China or not, but that doesn't really hold any water.
Yeah,
either.
it doesn't hold water because
you can say Texas is historically a part of Mexico. Does that mean Texas is part of Mexico? Right.
Right. Exactly. Good point. So just claiming something, just because you're saying it, does not make it real.
Yep. So. Yep.
All right. Well, that's about it. We hope you comment below. I'm sure there's going to be just a few. Interesting fake accounts, perhaps. People comment. Anyways, we hope there's some good discussion. We hope that Xi Jinping takes the time to watch this video, because we know he has a VPN, right, Tom?
Oh yes. Actually, all these guys have VPNs in order to comment on Quora.
They all have VPNs, and so we know you're watching. We know you're capable of watching. We hope there's some. Yeah, and we know Xi Jinping likes Pooh Bear. Well, let's just talk about that just for a second, just at the very end. So Xi Jinping banned all types of Pooh Bear, the movies, the character, the bears themselves were banned. What was the main thing that got Pooh Bear banned in China, Tone?
Well, you can actually look up the image and search for it and put it on here as well. But basically, the original image was a picture of Xi Jinping walking with Barack Obama, and the Xi Jinping, yeah, just the Xi Jinping Pooh Bear. You got to put Pooh there, yeah. Okay. If you could just go to the image, yeah, there we go. So yeah, this is the image that originally got Pooh Bear banned, and it was just a comparison between Barack Obama's Tigger and Xi Jinping as Winnie the Pooh, and also the other graphic of the Japanese Prime Minister as Eeyore. These are the two images that got Pooh Bear banned in China. So we can say, Ethan, Chinese are not emotional at all.
Chinese are definitely not emotional. Like, we don't believe they're emotional at all.
No.
All right, well, guys, we're obviously joking about that because they're obviously very emotional about it.
They would never make any split decisions like boycott something. Or
they would never
based on some
boycott
emotional
a
issue,
whole
right?
country's whole brand just because of an emotional reason, right?
So Ethan, since there's a lot of news going on about China invading Taiwan, we're wondering why did they need to invade Taiwan if Taiwan is supposedly already part of China?
That's right. That is the question, is why is this invasion of Taiwan such a big, hot topic and big deal if technically Taiwan is already part of China? Why is China pushing it so hard? So let's give you a little bit of background. Before we finish this episode, this podcast, we're going to talk about a few articles and a few Quora questions to help flesh out the more recent issue of China and Taiwan's relationship. So the first article we have is talking about China warplanes flying near Taiwan in record numbers. So they've been flying near Taiwan for a while, quite a while. But I think in the last months, especially this year, 2021, there's been a lot more flights, like warplanes flown into Taiwan's air defense zone. It's like it says here in this article, which is just a few days ago. This is the April 21st. Today is the 25th. So more and more in record numbers this month, even in April. So it says Taiwan's ministry reported an additional 9 military aircraft intrusions on Tuesday. So they're really stepping it up quite a bit. And it goes into detail talking about invasion sent 69 planes towards 69 planes towards the Chinese claimed island. The point is that they've increased the level of provocation, kind of like rattling the saber is what they usually say, right? Rattling the saber means China is trying to make itself be known and make everyone look at them and say, oh, they are so strong, right? The U.S. has honestly used military presence to create a show of strength as well. And to be honest, every country does this if they have enough military power. I think it's dumb, though, for any country to do this, but this is what happens. Also, to give some background, just like Trump did, I mean, on presidents before Biden and Trump, Biden is also going to sell some arms, sell some weapons, and probably some, I don't know, planes and other type of. They're going to sell some self-propelled artillery, and a deal expected to be fulfilled within 3 years. This has been pretty commonly going on for years now, and also pisses off China because China, of course, hates Taiwan having any military strength at all.
Yep.
Chong, what do you think about this article?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty common with what you've seen. I mean, every successive administration want to back Taiwan, and it's become more of a deal recently because of the kind of relationships that China and the U.S. has had, which has been more aggressive lately. So yeah, I mean, let's take a look actually at what Chinese people think. I think we have a few answers.
Yes.
What the military buildups and stuff. So.
Yes.
Potential invasions.
Let's get into the first Quora article. Tong, lead us in.
Okay, so this is one of the core questions, very popular. It says if China invades Taiwan one day, will the U.S. help Taiwan defend itself against China? And Charlie Zhang, who is a native Chinese person and works at Shanghai, great company to work for,
Yeah.
and he says in the answer here, it's not quite accurate to use the word invade to describe mainland China, because actually the Chinese Civil War has never ended. No peace agreement or documents have ever been signed, which, I mean, if you want to talk about something that's some kind of equivalent to this, that's like South Korea saying, oh, we can go to North Korea anytime because actually no peace treaty has ever been signed. It's just a ceasefire. No armistice has ever been signed. So that means Korea's still in a civil war, right? But thing is, if you talk to Chinese about it, they would probably say, "Oh, South Korea is invading North Korea, or North Korea invaded South Korea." But for Taiwan, right, even though it's the exact same thing, it's not an invasion; it's a civil war because they actually, own Taiwan, right, quote unquote. So we can see that China does not attack Taiwan; it's considered part of an unfinished civil war, right? So it's
Yeah.
like it's like the Confederate United States, basically. So and
Yes.
then he goes into this scenario. Um, basically, he talks about the U.S. troops. The U.S. He doesn't think that the U.S. military will intervene because the intervention is costly. Benefit is not enough. U.S. do not hold a moral advantage. So,
Do you think the U.S. cares that it's costly to protect Taiwan?
well, you got to think about what do they actually gain by losing Taiwan. So I would say,
No, what do they lose? What's the U.S. lose basically if they lose Taiwan? Remember, I saw a graphic recently. I don't have the picture in front of me, but the Taiwan Strait is the economic trade highway into India and a lot of the countries in. Basically, it's a massive trade highway. Now, as you've probably seen in articles, if you guys have been watching the news and stuff, but basically China takes these small little islands, basically sometimes just a rock, and they'll build up a whole island out of the sea by pouring sand in and pouring material in, and then just basically claim that it's theirs and start building military bases on that freaking island, and they just start building up these
oh,
pseudo military bases everywhere in this
well, I
area
would
to.
be surprised by that, but I think right now the thing is the U.S. actually has trades way more with China than with Taiwan. So I
That's
think
true.
out of the two, if you don't want to piss one of them off, probably China's the worst one to piss off just because it's bigger and then you do more trade with them. But then again, China also incurs a cost, right, if they invade because they'll get condemned by the international community if they do that. So at the end, he says, finally, as a Chinese mainlander, I don't think there will ever be a war, but Chinese always choose the least costly action and as embodying the art of war. So to solve the Taiwan problem, China has other choices. We don't know what those other choices are, but let's just leave it at
What
that.
exactly are these other choices? Who
Yeah.
knows? The U.S. has been supporting Taiwan. It's the Taiwan Relations Act, where the U.S. promised to provide Taiwan with the adequate military means to defend itself. Although no promises were made to guarantee the U.S. defense of China, previous U.S. interventions during the first, second, and third Taiwan Strait crisis have stood as a strong warning to China. So basically, the U.S. it's in the U.S.'s best interest. Before we get into the second article, it's in the U.S. best interest to keep this balance of power, and if China takes over completely, then they're on a way to they're on a path to like basically worldwide domination is what they want.
Yeah. Although I think neither party would really gain much from it. They'll probably just lose. It's kind of like a lose-lose thing. So they prefer to keep the status quo. It's kind of like how North Korea is right now. Like no one wants to do anything because if they do something, it's actually worse for everyone else. So it's kind of like this situation where it's it's just kind of better the way it is right now. So
I think the other thing to mention, or just go into the next article.
yeah, let's do
Um,
the next article and get a viewpoint from an actual quote unquote citizen of Taiwan.
yeah, we have a citizen of Taiwan. Unfortunately, he's not actual Taiwanese. The
He
point
has an
is,
answer. Yeah.
here's a good answer. Taiwan isn't recognized. Why doesn't China invade Taiwan? Taiwan isn't recognized as a foreign sovereign country, so why doesn't China invade and take it back? So Yusuf says, basically, yeah, well, he notes that there's many Chinese perspectives, which there are. Um, Taiwan isn't recognized which is true. There's very few countries that actually recognize it. But U.S. and Taiwan have strong ties, as indicated in this Taiwan Relations Act. Basically, it's in the U.S.'s best interest to protect them. And it goes into talking about China could invade. It would cost thousands of lives. Such an invasion, the point is, it's going to have major damage to the relationship, as well as a lot of lives lost on both sides.
Yep.
Chinese and Taiwanese lives, which is basically like, killing part of your family. It's just stupid. Like, why do you want to waste tons of money on... look at this. It says he compares it to the Vietnam War, which I think is really good because the Vietnam War was a mess. He says, matter of fact, the conflict could end up a scenario similar to that of the Vietnam War, where the U.S. military was defeated by the Viet Cong forces. It could, but it's totally different times now. What do you think, Tom?
It's a good comparison because in the Vietnam War, what happened was North Vietnam, which is a communist Vietnam, right, invaded the democratic South Vietnam. But what ended up happening is even though they ended up winning, a lot of civilians died during that war.
Yep.
So it might not be worth it because China's going to lose, Taiwan's going to lose, U.S. also going to lose. So like everyone loses. It's just not.
Not just the immediate death toll and the loss of like structures in Taiwan. Do you think Taiwanese are going to be any happier about China forcing themselves on the country? Taiwanese already do not like the political manipulation that China does in Taiwan. They do. They have a lot of money flowing into the Taiwan, like basically certain part, like people that's they're trying to manipulate the government internally.
Just to give you a preview of what happened, right? What would happen? You've seen the Hong Kong protests. That's 8 million people in Hong Kong. You've seen how big that protest is. Taiwan is almost 30 million people. So just imagine that times, 4 times. So
4 times the number of people, and especially pissed off if you get invaded by a military invasion. That would piss people off.
Not good. Yeah.
And a lot of other countries are going to see it as kind of I don't know, what do you call it?
It would be a kind of like a breach, right? Like the UN would probably have to intervene and everything.
Yeah, so. UN is probably going to get involved. A lot of other countries might get involved as well. Japan and Korea might get involved militaristically also, because if China is going to threaten Taiwan, then Japan and Korea are going to feel threatened as well, because China is not one to really respect for example, the Taiwan Strait or the China Strait. And with the building up these military islands, and you're welcome to look it up. There's these islands that they literally build out of the ocean, based around single rocks sometimes. So it would definitely throw the power balance off in that whole region, and it would destabilize things in a dramatic way. Is there any more key takeaway points in here?
I think he makes a good point. I mean, like you said, the final result would still be a divided China. Like even if you take it over, like China would still be divided, and a lot of people die.
With death and destruction, massive loss to infrastructure and life.
Yep, with very little gain, I think, from it.
Yeah. And not only that, China already suffers. Let's think about it from like a PR or marketing perspective. China already has a pretty shoddy image, I would say, in the world's view perspective, right?
In Western countries, yes.
Especially Western countries. I don't know how perhaps other Asian countries view them, but in Western countries, China's image is pretty terrible. As far as especially with the Uyghurs, and we'll talk about this in another podcast. The whole Xinjiang forced labor camps, and how there's different reporters try to go in there. Anyways, it's a whole nother topic. But
China doesn't have a good relationship with anyone. Well, not even the Asian countries, Japan, Korea, Philippines.
They don't.
India,
They
Vietnam.
don't.
We saw they have issues with pretty much everyone.
So they have issues with many other local Asian neighbors. So if they invade Taiwan, they're going to piss everyone off. It's going to be significant losses and damage to relationship with other countries, damage to trade. It would be so stupid. Basically, the end result is death, destruction, loss of inter-country relations. It's very clear what the result would be.
Yep.
All right, last article, Tom. Go ahead.
So the first answer I think is by a person named Saturn GM.
Wait, let's highlight this guy's.
Named after a lovely 1990s or before previous car brand. Very
This is
popular.
this terrible. This was a terrible. Like, why would you name yourself? Why? Like, you've already delegitimized yourself. Like, there's so many fake posters on Quora, and they hide behind these fake names, Tone.
Why not Cadillac? Why Saturn, right?
Yeah, why wouldn't you just go for BMW?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and then say BMW read a lot of books.
Yeah, you'd be more believable in a Saturn GM.
All right, what's it
Anyways,
say?
in his answer, he says, when will China, so the question is, when will China invade Taiwan? The answer, the sooner the better, a few hours, preferably. Well, if you ask the Taiwanese politicians, they'll tell you they can last a week. The Taiwan leaders can step block, call for international intervention. And if you ask Taiwan's military generals, they'll tell you very soon, almost unthinkable. And he says Taiwan lacks soldiers who are really at war, not gaps. Not sure what that means.
What does this even mean? Like, dude, if you're gonna troll on Quora and make ridiculous claims, and then please choose an actual name.
One fact everyone must admit is Taiwan's army is useless because once mainland soldiers land successfully, they basically fail. Okay, was he playing a lot of Civilization or something? I don't know. So, Air Force and Navy are useful. These types are technical. And then it says, Taiwan's training time for reservists too short. Military power is not low in the world. Okay, ranking within top. But that's weird because he said Taiwan didn't have a military. Now he says military power is not low in the world, ranking within 20. But the world does not rank. The U.S. military standard is the sum of the top 10. That's correct. While China is nearly 20 times Taiwan's, probably, because they have a billion people. So how do you fight this? Best way is to join mutual defense organizations such as NATO, but the NATO is North American, right? That's part of the name. But they do have that defense treaty, right? As we saw before. So what he's talking about is what would happen if China invaded Chinese mainland, a wave of drones led by fighter jets to attack Taiwan. I'm sure he's really predicting the future here. So Taiwan's radar can identify real fighters. The mainland can launch missiles based on radar signals, and Taiwan becomes blind. China mainland will immediately launch missiles to attack the airport. So this guy apparently knows a lot about what's going to happen in the future. So if the plane can't take off, there's no air advantage, no air support. Navy has no advantage. He's talking about theoretical, right? Chinese war. The process is very fast to Taiwan's young people. The night before, still have a good night's sleep. Woke up to the war. The Taiwan Sea is over.
Oh, what is this saying? What is saying this?
The process is very fast. The process, not invasion, it's a process. Fast to Taiwan's young people.
It's just like a shot. It's just like an email, Yang, right? You just take care of the Taiwan problem just like a shot.
The Taiwanese problem, just like a shot. It's a process, right? So
they're always treating them and speaking in condescending manner.
They do to everyone pretty much. So yes, the night before still have a good night's sleep, but woke up to the war in the Taiwan Sea is over. It's like a dramatic ending to a book. You can go down to the end a little bit more. Yep.
So you notice he doesn't mention any intervention by any other country, which there definitely would be. He's assuming that Taiwan is all by itself, which is totally not true. U.S. would step in here. U.S. has massive military, like naval presence. They have fighter jets that they could scramble and send in. He doesn't mention the U.S. military presence. He doesn't mention Japan coming in to help as well, which would probably happen as well because Japan has strong ties to Taiwan.
The bottom, he talks about the U.S. now. He says, United States unlikely to sell Taiwan 2 advanced weapons. On the other hand, in order Chinese mainland to take care of the mood, whatever that means. On the other hand, the U.S. knows that Taiwan will eventually return. The U.S. is worried that China stole secrets. And then look at that one after. How can Americans trust a yellow country? Then that's an interesting one.
Like, how can a Chinese person say this? They're being racist to their own country.
Well, apparently that's part of their country, so they're actually insulting their own people.
This doesn't make sense, man.
So whenever they insult Taiwanese, that's actually their own people because that's part of their country. Same thing with Hong Kong, by the way.
So many of the weapons Taiwan buys are useless. Really, so spending millions of dollars, these high-tech military like artillery and weapons and planes Taiwan buys from the U.S. are useless? That's total lies. Like, they may not get the latest type of planes, but they are very high-tech. And, like, these are some very recent F-class fighter jets that Taiwan buys. So that's total lie.
Yeah, when we saw the article about Biden.
So he doesn't even back up. He just says he's just spouting nonsense. Buys are useless, and then he says Americans know that, and so do Taiwanese. So, for example, unmanned aircraft are mainly used for beheadings. What now is he talking about, like drones that are used for beheadings?
Well,
Like, what's this guy?
So I think, yeah, this to me is like, what do they use for executions? Are they talking about North Korea? What do you mean unmanned aircraft used for beheadings? So he's talking about like this North Korea execution where they stick you to propeller and then like execute you that way. Does that happen in Taiwan?
This article like had a few good points in the beginning, but it just went into totally ridiculous.
No, it started with the sooner the better, which I already knew.
Yeah, this article is not great. Okay, so our last article, we are going to talk about like Xi Jinping's Thought Certificate. Xi Jinping, of course, wants to show his dominance and power in China. So he created this certificate program, and it basically was added into the Red Book, right? He had his doctrine added into the Red Book, which Mao Zedong wrote.
Yeah.
Don't lead us into this.
So this is interesting about Xi Jinping compared to his predecessors, Hu Jintao, right, and Jiang Zemin. It's like what happened is Xi Jinping, I think, because he wants to be better than his predecessors, so he created this new thought, which he wants entered into the history books, much like Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping, which are, they're widely revered in China. So he wants to be part of that group. So he created this Xi Jinping thought. And not to mention, by the way, he eliminated the presidential term limits, which allows him to be president forever.
Yeah, he started that, right? Xi Jinping, like when he first got into power, he immediately, wasn't that probably one of the first things he did?
Probably like a few years after he eliminated the term limits. So yeah, that's another reason why he wants to be like Mao Zedong. So anyways, this is yet another thing he wants to tie himself to Mao Zedong to, is having the Xi Jinping thought, much like Mao's little red book that people had to carry back then. So now, I guess, I didn't even know this, but apparently you can take classes in Xi Jinping thought and have a master's degree in it.
Why is he so excited? You can take Xi Jinping's like thought class.
I know. That's
on edX.
And what's even more exciting is he said the instructor was none other than the distinguished Tsinghua University professor Hu Angang, known for his close links to senior government leaders, and he claims that China has already overtaken the United States as the global superpower. Who else could be better to explain the intricacies of the new era?
Wow, this feels like someone who's extreme pro-China.
It seems that he really wants a way into the Chinese government, it looks like. Kevin wants to be Xi Jinping's right-hand man. And I think
so. I think Kevin's going for, look at this, he already did it. He passed in grade in Xi Jinping's thought on socialism.
He's going to ace the course, he says.
No, so, he was determined on it. Not that he was going to take the course, he was going to ace it.
Yep.
I didn't know that this guy was so pro-China.
But look at down below. He says he's already well-versed, actually, in Mao Zedong thought.
He spent the 2 decades studying Chinese political culture.
Yep. So down there he says, I'm well-versed. He's already well-versed in Mao Zedong thought and Deng Xiaoping theory. He studied both of them in Nanjing. So you already have some background there studying Mao Zedong thought, Deng Xiaoping theory. I guess you want to complete the whole trilogy of Chinese communist dictators by
yeah. Why would you want to take this course and get this dogma grinded into your head? All right, that's it for this podcast. We are done, and next time, another fiery topic. All right, thanks for watching. See you guys next time. Leave a comment, subscribe, put some thoughtful insight. Please do not use your spam or bot accounts because I'm going to delete those anyways. We want like insightful discussion. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.